Yá'át'ééh, my relatives. Good morning. Hello. Today is Friday, May 6th already, and I'm sitting down with my second cup of coffee. And I invite you to grab a cup of coffee and join me. Today, I'm going to be talking with my former VP candidate and current mayoral candidate from Lexington, Kentucky, Adrian Wallace. And so, if you followed me back in 2020 for my independent campaign for president, you know that Adrian Wallace ran with me as my vice presidential candidate, and he is currently running for mayor of Lexington, Kentucky. And so he and I keep in touch pretty regularly. And this morning, he was gracious enough to join me for a second cup of coffee, and we're going to have a conversation about the work we've done together in the past, as well as the work he's trying to do today in running for office in Lexington. But before I begin, I want to do as I always do, which is acknowledge that I'm speaking to you from what's now known as Washington, D.C. But these are the traditional lands of the Piscataway. And I want to honor the Piscataway as the host people of these lands. I want to thank them for the stewardship of these lands. And I want to state just how humbled I am to be living on these lands today. So, Yá'át'ééh, my Piscataway relatives. So, without any further ado, let me go ahead and bring Adrian on this morning. And he has a cup of coffee with him too. And we will get our conversation going. Hey, Yá'át'ééh, Adrian, it's good to see you.
Hey, good morning. Good to see you too.
Glad you could join me. How's the coffee in Lexington today?
It's good, especially when it comes from my best dad ever mug. It just increases the flavor.
Okay. So what kind of coffee do you like? Are you I'm a bit of a coffee snob. Are you particular about your coffee, or what do you like to drink?
I'm very particular. A lot of folks don't know that in 2012 I actually planned to open a coffee shop and haven't had the financing to do it yet. But that's one of the things that I'd like to get going. But I started drinking coffee. It was Taster's Choice when I was a kid. My great grandmother was like, "Oh, to help your sinuses and your allergies." I guess
Yeah.
it's those old people remedies, right? But Taster's Choice, quick instant coffee is like, that's not coffee. You grow up and you learn better. But no, so my favorite, I love like South American and African beans, but Starbucks is like, yeah, we go, the kids like it, but they over roast their beans, so I am pretty picky.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually went to my favorite local coffee shop here in DC this morning and got some more whole beans from Harar Coffee Shop. So I'm drinking the good stuff this morning too, out of my bluebird flower mug. So
I
I
love it.
see we have Phil Fox on with us this morning. We have Shantina on with us. We have Holly and Oscar. So Yá'át'ééh, my relatives, thanks for joining us. As I said earlier, when I was running for my campaign in 2020 for president of the United States, Adrian ran with me as my vice presidential candidate. And believe it or not, Adrian and I, we've been in some of the same circles. We were both involved with CCDA together. We've been around each other, but we have not. It wasn't until during my campaign when we started talking more frequently. And he actually worked as my campaign manager for the second half of my campaign as well. But we've never met personally. We haven't been in the same city. And then, of course, during the campaign, COVID hit. And so travel wasn't possible. We were hoping we'd get out and do some stuff on the campaign trail together. But when COVID hit, we weren't able to do much on the campaign trail. And
Yeah.
so most of our relationship has taken place either over the phone or over Zoom.
Which is so
And so,
appropriate during the pandemic and COVID, right?
yeah. So anyway, and of course, we keep in touch a lot since the campaign. And let me go ahead and just open it up. You can introduce yourself, Adrian, and share whatever you'd like to share here at the beginning.
Well, I just first of all want to say good morning to everybody, and for those of you who did follow us in 2020 during the campaign, you know that I am here in Lexington, Kentucky, which is where I was born and raised for the most part. But I definitely want to acknowledge the people of the Osage, the Shawnee, the Cherokee, and the Yuchi as a traditional people indigenous to these lands here in Lexington, and certainly want to honor and recognize them for their stewardship and the history that they still are making here in Kentucky. And so I thank you for inviting me on this journey, not only to help you raise the voice of indigenous peoples across the nation, but also across the globe. For anybody who hasn't read Unsettling Truths, you need to, first of all, read it. And then you need to catch Mark on his tour this summer. He's doing a book tour. And I would say you would be highly blessed to be in the same room and breathe the same air as him and learn from him. As he said, I first heard of and heard Mark speak in 2015 in Chicago. And like you said, we didn't actually get to FaceTime then, but I've been quoting him ever since. And I actually sent him a message and said, hey, I don't want to just steal this. I want to give you credit. And he said, absolutely. But I mean, everything from the foundational level issues to how we move together in community. If you haven't read the book, you need to do it. So.
Well, thank you very much. When we ran that campaign together, I think, that I was very particular about the way I wanted the campaign to be structured. And I was very intentional about making sure we kept the conversation through our campaign about the foundations and about, the challenges we see in our world, in our society today, whether it's mass incarceration, whether it's the treatment of women. All of these can be traced back down to the doctrine of discovery and the way that our foundations were written, our Constitution and our Declaration of Independence. And I'm curious because I know that's not a specific way or a common way to run a campaign, but I'm curious for you having that experience both of watching my campaign and then being a part of it, and having that intentional focus on the foundational level issues. How would you say some of that has influenced the way that you approach politics today?
Mm-hmm.
Not only just as a citizen of the United States, but even in your specific run for mayor in Lexington?
It's a great question, right? So I was having this conversation this week because of the Roe v. Wade decision in the Supreme Court, or the leak, I guess, right? There's not an officially decision. But the bottom line is we have to get back to the foundations. And nobody said it better than you, that we, the people, never truly meant all the people. And so, of course, a woman doesn't have rights over her body, because we, the people, never was intended to mean a woman's rights. And so when we want to rally and protest and scream and yell about the things that are being done to us, it's because we have an issue with the foundation. And if we don't fix the foundation, then we can't fix anything on the local level. We can try, and far too many of those efforts will be band-aids. And so locally, when I talk about the issues that plague us, from homicide to homelessness and the housing crisis, we have to talk about foundational level issues. And even not going all the way back to the Constitution, we just have to look at wealth and asset generation, and the fact that concentrated poverty leads to so many of our issues. And so having that insight and understanding and following you has helped me then take a step back and look at the issues locally and how to address them, and to say, well, if we look at root causes, then we cannot ignore systemic and generational racism and poverty.
Yeah. I appreciate what you said about what's happening now with the Roe versus Wade. Obviously, this is a massive shift, and this is a very passionate debate our nation is having right now. And during the campaign, when we were running, one of the major speeches that I gave, I was actually in Portland, Oregon, where I'm headed back to next week. And I gave a speech about my position on abortion. And the way I framed that speech is I said, the debate is framed in our nation as pro-life and pro-choice. But if you read the Constitution, there's actually nothing in the Constitution that articulates a value for life. There's values for exploitation and profit. There's values for white supremacy. There's nothing that articulates the value for life. And technically, I mean, not even technically, if you read the Constitution, right, it's filled with gender-specific male pronouns. There's not a single female pronoun in the entire Constitution. And so the debate over abortion is not a debate about the value of life. it's a debate about who gets to control the woman's body. Does the woman have agency to control what happens to her own body, or does the white dominated male politics and politicians get to control what the woman does to her body?
Right.
And I absolutely agree and advocate that the women absolutely need to have control over what happens to their own bodies and be free to make the choices that they need to make. The challenge I have is the way the politics of our society frames the debate is we don't actually talk about the heart of the issue. And so I'm actually waiting. I mean, I've said more today than I've said so far this whole week about this issue, but probably sometime the next week or two, I'm going to take a whole second cup of coffee and talk more in depth about what we need to address, even expanding on what I did when I was running for office in 2020. And so I'm
Yeah.
glad you brought that up, because absolutely, this is a conversation we need to be actively engaged in. And I think, it is definitely high time that women are given agency over their own bodies today, and that needs to happen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the thing, right? From that, we were also talking about one of the interviews you did recently with, was it Abolition Today? When we talk about incarceration, I mean, if there's something that is foundationally, we have an amendment to abolish slavery, but it wasn't, right? The exception clause, and the fact that people are forced to work for 86 cents a day. I mean, this is over $14 billion worth of profit that's being stolen off of the backs of these people. And so, yeah, we got it on the screen here, and it's like, so what is it? Abolishslavery.net or .us?
Yeah, abolish slavery .us is this website here. I'll actually put the link into the comment section. But go ahead, Key. I don't mean to
No,
interrupt you.
no,
I just
you're
wanted to
fine.
show
You're
this
fine. But the
while
issue
you're
is
talking.
right. We know that we have this prison industrial complex, and that people are profiting off of the backs of people being incarcerated, and that recidivism rates only increase every time somebody is locked up. I serve on the Juvenile Detention Alternative Initiative Steering Committee here in town. I've been doing that for about 10 years now, and the majority of these young people between the ages of 10 and 17, once they get locked up, they are over 75% likely to recidivate, that they will see jail again, and that they are over 90% likely to then become have felonies as adults. And so, if we know those numbers, then we know that statistics show that alternatives to detention, programs that keep them out of locked facilities, would greatly increase their opportunities for success in life. Then that means that we should make those investments, but we're not. And that's because foundationally, we're still okay with slavery and we're profiting off of it.
Yeah.
And so it's such a big issue, and nobody's even having these conversations. And as we talked about earlier, if nobody brings it to light and nobody discusses it, then the status quo is just going to be maintained.
Yeah, when I was on the podcast, and for those of you who don't know, I was on Abolition Today last Sunday, and we did a radio show that they have a weekly radio show, and I was on the show, and the host of that show, they were sharing some of their stats with me and some of the things that they're working on, and I think they said there are 27 states in the United States that have a clause in their state constitution that somehow keeps slavery legal within the criminal justice system. Just like the 13th Amendment does at a national level, there are 27 states that have that same clause keeping it legal at the state level. And one of the states that is on that list is Kentucky. That Abolition Today is actually working to try and raise that issue, and they've been successful in states like Utah and Colorado and a few other states where they've gotten the states to remove that clause from their state constitutions. There's a lot of states where it's going to come up for vote, or it's in committee right now to address those issues. And so this is why what we're doing and what we were trying to do in 2020 at a national level is conversations we absolutely need to have at the local level.
Yeah.
And whether it's talking about the rights of women, whether it's talking about just the value of life, whether it's talking about mass incarceration and where slavery is kept legal. These are things that need to be addressed both nationally as well as locally, if we're going to truly build this nation where, as we said in 2020, we the people actually means all the people.
Exactly.
So,
I wish I could have a running mate for mayor. I would just actually.
so I'm curious for you. As you're running currently now, you're running for mayor in Lexington. What are some of the things that you are trying to do in Lexington, in Kentucky, that are part of your campaign? Like, what are the things that you're trying to bring to the forefront and I think you have a primary election coming up soon, correct?
I do. Yeah. Since while we're talking about that, let me look at my countdown. I haven't looked at it this morning, so I always do my countdowns. I had one for Mark too. We'll put it on the screen. I don't think you can really see it, but we're 10 days, 17 hours, and 59 minutes until the polls open on May 17th. So we're getting close, and of course, well, and then not including early voting. But this is the second time that I ran locally. I ran the first time in 2018 for what we call council at large. Our city government merged in the 70s, and we have a 15-member city council, legislative body. The top three vote getters in the November election for that are elected, and the top vote getter becomes vice mayor. So I ran for vice mayor in 2018, and I'm actually the first African American to hit his highest fourth place in both the primary and the general elections. So we have a really good base of support. The message resonated with folks, but we needed to raise a whole lot more money to really get my name out and get our message heard, which I'm sure we'll talk about before we close, about money in this system, right? But I realized in 18 that I wanted to run again because nothing had been done, nothing had been changed, that we did not get the message heard across the community as we needed to. And so when I got ready to run again, I considered going at large again, but I believed that I could make more change running for mayor, that in the executive branch that we would have resources and commissioners over departments, that we could better utilize our assets. When I look at budgets, the way that I look at everything, and I talked a lot about this in 2020, is look at the budget for our federal government. The majority of our funds are spent on in the Department of Defense on military, right? On national defense. It's almost mirrored on the local level, that the majority of funds, anywhere between 50 and 60% of cities' budgets across the nation, typically are spent on public safety. Now, that's an issue when you look at the fact that for the last 10 years, we've had record homicides. And the last three chiefs of police that I've worked with have all agreed that by the time it gets to 911, it's too late. So we know that investing more money into public safety does not actually make your community safer. We have got to invest our dollars in public health, and understanding a public health approach, and then strengthening our local economy, especially through small businesses, has been really the crux of my campaign. And I said, and since 18, nothing has been done, nothing's changed. And so when I got ready to run for mayor this year, I said to my team, I kind of plan to use the same campaign points because nothing's been addressed. And I said, I don't want it to seem like it's lazy, but those are the reasons I'm running. When people always ask, why are you running? Why are you doing this? People say, well, why didn't you run for something smaller? Because you probably could have won that. And it's like, well, I'm not chasing or title seeking, right? I'm seeking to make true change. And that's the reason why I tell folks that the reason I'm running on my 3 campaign points, and it's building community, promoting economic growth and stability, and expanding educational opportunity. So it's community, education, and economics. And that means that we have got to focus on public health, and we have to focus on the foundations, and the fact that generational concentrated poverty has created far too many of these issues.
Yeah. As you mentioned earlier in the conversation, that you first heard me speak, and we met through we became aware of each other through CCDA. How has your faith played a part within this journey that you're on? How does your faith play a part with what you're trying to do, both what we did together in 2020 as well as what you're doing today in Lexington?
Oh, that's a great question. So, especially when we're thinking about Roe v. Wade, so I'll segue into that. But so, number one, I tell folks, my faith. I'm pretty conservative when it comes to theology, to my faith. What the Bible says, I believe it. And I try to live it. None of us are perfect, but try to walk that out and be that example. But because I'm so conservative theologically, when I read Scripture, I read that Jesus is love. I read that we're left on this earth to make it better, to be salt and light to a dark and decaying world. And when I see the hopelessness that far too many people deal with, then I say I'm running because I want to bring true shalom to Lexington, where there's nothing missing and there's nothing broken. But that doesn't mean forcing my faith or pushing Jesus down people's throats, right? What that means is loving them regardless, loving people. And when you do that, then you say, okay, well, does that mean you would support abortion? You're against abortion? Well, no, that means that God is pro-choice, as one of my friends here in Lexington likes to say. He's pro-choice. And so that doesn't mean that I support using that as birth control, but it means that you have no idea what the reasons why people do this. And when I first got into ministry, I did a lot of studying on it because it was one of those big issues that people cared about. And it really grieved me because my white friends on the right usually will say, well, Adrian, how can you be a Christian and be okay with that? But the bottom line is that the majority of young women that through the research that we saw reported economic reasons for having abortions. But again, regardless, making them illegal is not going to stop them from happening. It's only going to put people in harm's way. And so what that means is if you are a believer, a follower of Jesus, what you should do is you come alongside people. You walk alongside them and teach them what it is that God would have them to do. That is if they believe the same way. But that's the reason why we have separation of church and state, because I am not supposed to legislate the heart. I cannot legislate salvation. I wouldn't desire to, because that's not what God does. He doesn't force himself on me. As my uncle says, he's a perfect gentleman. And so my faith makes me the man that I am and makes me want to put myself out there to be a public servant, to be exhibit true servant leadership. But it certainly doesn't force me to hate or to try and dictate people's lives.
Thank you for sharing that. When we ran our campaign together in 2020, and I remember if I ever wanted to get depressed, I would go onto the SEC's website and I would compare the amount of money that the two major parties were raising for their campaigns.
Yeah.
And what we were raising. And, by the end of the campaign, I think both Trump and Biden I think Biden was over $1 billion and Trump was very, very close to it.
Yeah.
And as an independent candidate, right, I think we were around maybe 150,000. And so you look at just this massive discrepancy in what the two parties spend on campaigns and the difference. And one of the things I was very proud about with our campaign in 2020 is we were one of the highest fundraising independent candidates, and also maybe the third or fourth highest third party candidates. I think the Green Party and Libertarians raised more than we did, but we were for someone running outside the two-party system.
Yeah.
We were actually holding our own.
Right.
And that included against Brock Pierce and Kanye West, who they had more money than we did because they were both billionaires,
right.
But we fundraised more than they did. And so I'm curious, so there's this massive discrepancy, right, between spending and fundraising in the two-party system. How do you see that playing out at the local level? Because I know you're running as a Democrat, but how do you see the fundraising discrepancy play out at the local level as you're running in Kentucky?
Yeah. So,
and even just what are your thoughts on what happened to us in the presidential campaign, right, where we had this massive discrepancy between us and the other candidates?
Yeah. So the first thing is that in this race, and it's understandable, right, because of the way the system works. And I've, as you said, I've worked on and run campaigns. If people don't think you can raise money, they're not going to give it to you. Or if they don't think you can win, they're not going to give you money. But if they don't think you can raise money, then they're also not going to invest in you, because it's all about money. And while in 2018, my first race, polling showed me doing well, so people gave big checks. And I raised about half of what I needed to, but I raised $70,000 for this local election. This time I've only raised about $7,000. And this is a much bigger race in which I need to raise anywhere from $250,000 to $1 million. But the problem is I'm against an incumbent mayor, and another candidate who's currently on council in his first term, who gave himself $275,000 to start. And so anybody who knows me knows that I don't have 275 grand laying around to just put into the account. So that makes it tough. And then looking at just that landscape, the system says, well, you can't win, so we're not going to give you any money. And that's the reason why I've had a hard time fundraising. So it's been a true grassroots effort, much like yours had to be. And I've told folks when I launched my campaign, I did an interview, and people tell me, well, Adrian, you're a smart guy politically. Why would you go run with some independent guy and tick off so many people when we had to get rid of Donald Trump? And it's like, well, first of all, the way the system is set up, we weren't going to be stuck with him. It was either going to be we were going to win or Joe Biden was going to win. Joe Biden was chosen because he was an easy choice. He was a safe bet for a lot of folks. But what really upset me about the system was at the end of 2019, beginning of 2020, when Axios put out an article about the fact that the leading 6 or so Democratic candidates of color collectively did not outraise Joe Biden, Elizabeth Warren, and Pete Buttigieg. Now, what that says is the Barack Obamas of the world can win and be competitive in a race for president if they were raised in white culture, honestly, and if they go to Harvard, right? Tim Wise talks about this in his book, Between Barack and a Hard Place, and he calls it Racism 2.0. We have to always outperform times 10, times 100 as people of color in order to be competitive in this country. And we have to fix that system. And again, if we don't start calling it out, then nothing's going to change. And that's the reason why from the foundation, we have to make change. And I think that's the reason why we see so much alignment in both of our political ideologies, even though, like you said, I still am a Democrat because I strategically do believe until we can truly change the system, and I'm banking on you to help do it, that it's going to be a two-party system and we've got to operate within that. However, in Lexington, we actually, for mayor, it's a nonpartisan race. So we are registered Democrat and Republican, but we don't talk about it, and honestly, the feeling in the city is typically they don't want to hear what our parties we belong to just because they want to only discuss the issues. And in fact, the current mayor, the Democrat that ran against her because she's a Republican, last time brought up her political party affiliation, and it actually backfired. People were really upset about it. So it's really a kind of nuanced situation in our city, the way everything is set up with our government and our politics.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I was grabbing an article, something I wanted to kind of segue into here too, and we'll only go just a few more minutes here. But I get asked frequently what I'm going to do for 2024. Am I going to run again, or what are my thoughts on that? And I have been very adamant of telling people I'm going to make that decision probably sometime after the midterm elections. I've been spending a lot of time over the last year and a half reflecting on our campaign in 2020 and trying to think what would I do different in my strategy if I were to run again. And a poll that I saw, a video that or an article I saw, and a poll that was run about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, and this was reported by The Hill. And this is something I found very interesting. It said that 58% of voters are open to backing independent candidate if they are faced with Biden-Trump in 2024. And so I saw that article and I'm like, and that was one of the biggest challenges that our campaign had in 2020 was the fear mongering of, if you vote for Mark and Adrian, if you vote the Charles Wallace ticket, then you are voting essentially for Trump. And there was a whole segment of politics that played it that way. The Democratic Party played it that way. And what I find interesting is now that basically people are saying, yeah, if we have these same two candidates again, which is very likely, right? There's a very good chance. If I don't know if Trump's narcissism will allow him to sit out another campaign.
Not especially when he's winning races like Ohio by backing J.D. Vance,
Yeah, and Biden, he's already voiced his intention to run again as well. And so I found this article very interesting. I'm not going to make a decision until after the midterm elections. But one of the things I've been thinking about is if we did run again, what would we do different? what would I do different? And the reason I'm thinking that way is I think we had a great vision, right? A vision to build a nation where we the people truly means all the people. And we had people joining our campaign, donating to us up until a week, even a few days before the election happened. They were finding us online and they were saying, "Hey, it was very clear we weren't going to win, but they said, I love this vision. I love what you're doing. I love what you're working on." And they would donate to us, even though this was just a week or so before the election. But that vision was very, very captivating for people. And so I'm looking at how strategically could we build on that vision, and yet what could I do differently in my strategy to get the message out there more.
Yeah.
And I don't have all those answers yet, but those are some of the things I'm thinking about of what I want to do. You know,
Well, I'll
for
say it here because I know your supporters will appreciate this because, like you said, we were pretty open that I'm the Democrat, right? And honestly, that ticks off my party, right? People are like, why would you go support an independent guy? And I'm like, well, here's the reason why, and I stand by my decision. But I've told Mark that I think that he should join and run as a Democrat or Republican so that he can really be competitive and make that stage. But again, the way the system is set up, it might be hard. And so then I said, well, what about running for Congress or Senate? You know, that's just the way that our nation and the way politics are set up. That's what you're told to do. We'll run for lower office so that you can get there. And Mark's like, no, I don't want to do that. You know, I say, well, Mark, you got to accept super PAC money. We got to get an independent expenditure, and you got to let people max out, and we got to do call time and fundraise. He's like, I don't want to do that. And it's like, you know, that there is something to be said about that. And that, you know, if anybody hasn't been following, you need to, and you need to appreciate a leader who's willing to say, this might not be the easy route, but it's about principle, and it's about changing a foundation. And we can't change the foundations if I'm participating in it. And so I appreciate that out of you, and look forward to your decision after the midterms.
Yeah. Well, Adrian, this is such a good time. Thank you for being a guest and for joining me for this cup of coffee. I am very excited to watch your campaign and the race in Lexington. I shared your website on the chat earlier, so people can find you online. Is there anything you want to end with? Any last words you want to say here before we finish up this live stream?
I just want to say thank you again for having me on. Thank everybody for tuning in. As Mark said, my election is about 11 days away, May 17th. So if you have family and friends here in Lexington, I'd appreciate you letting them know. And then, of course, as we said, it does take money, and you know, small donations, you can make those on the website that he shared out. So I appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, Adrian, I definitely will like to have you back on again at some point and hear how things are going and just kind of keep touch base with you. You have become a great friend over the past year and a half, 2 years. I'm looking forward to meeting you in person.
Exactly. I told Mark, guys, I said I plan to come out on the book tour at some point when he comes through this way. So even if he doesn't stop in Kentucky, I'll drive to go hang out with him and the kids while on the tour.
Yeah, we're actually looking at hoping to bring the book tour to Lexington. I'm looking at I'm going to be driving from here to California over the summer with my family. And so we're hoping to stop either on the way out there or the way back in Lexington. And I'd love to, get some FaceTime with you, but then
I've
B,
got a few bookstores that would love to host you. So just let me know.
Okay. Well, hey, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. And if you're interested in the book that we're talking about, I'll put this in the comment section where you can purchase that book online. And if you're interested in supporting the work that we're doing, what I'm going to share today is I'm actually raising money for this book tour and to help cover the expenses because I don't have a massive PR agent behind me. We are doing a fundraiser on GoFundMe where you can support the book tour and help us cover the expenses to get the message of kind of these foundational level changes we need to make as I travel around the country. So thank you, my relatives, for joining us today. Thank you for sitting down for a second cup of coffee. And Adrian, it's good to have you here. Thanks
Always
for joining. I really appreciate you and look forward to seeing what happens in the future.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate it. Y'all have a good weekend. Don't forget the
Chat, my
derby.
relatives. Thank you. I'm sorry, what did you say?
I just said don't forget to tune into the derby tomorrow.
Yeah. Well, thank you, everybody. Walk in beauty, and may we learn how to walk in beauty together. Hakone.